Do you guys remember when UFC announced UFC 300?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the historic UFC 300 press conference from the MGM Grand Garden Arena. But the action Saturday moves across the street to the T-Mobile Arena for UFC 300, only on pay-per-view. And here are all the fighters on Saturday's record-breaking card, loaded from top to bottom with the best mixed martial artists on the planet.
What's up, Las Vegas? How are you guys?
So why couldn't we do that for the UFC White House card? We're back and we're blacker than ever. I'm not here to tell you any differently. Welcome to the DynamiteGizmo Podcast, everyone. Episode 291. Episode 290. Fuck you, bitch. 290. Fuck you. Oh, shit. Okay. Here's today's card. It's tradition around here to show you the card, but it's not tradition to show you what's on the card, but you'll find out anyway because we'll talk about it. Oh, gosh. So just this past weekend, we had UFC 326, Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira. 2 for the BMF title. And how did it go? Well, it wasn't great. It was probably one of the worst cards we've had this year, and that's okay. I always say you can't expect every single card to be an absolute bangarang. And I'll tell you what, this one wasn't. I didn't see many of the fights. I was preoccupied drinking beverages. I did watch the main card. I missed the Gregory Rodriguez fight, but I seen a few other ones. Drew Dober knocking out Black Eyes once again. Now Max Holloway steps in to defend his BMF title. And what happens? Charles wins dominantly, effectively, smothers him for the entirety of every single round. But we'll talk about the BMF a little later. I need to talk about the other story, the more significant thing that happened during that fight card. And that was the UFC White House announcement. We finally got the announcement of what the fuck and who the fuck is going to be on that card. All right? Now here's the thing about this White House card. As it is, if that card was a regular card, a regular numbered event, or even a fight night, there's no way it would be a fight night, because what I'm trying to get at is, as it stands, as is, it is very stacked. Okay? But because it has been hyped up to the point of it being exclaimed as the best card the UFC has ever produced, the money they poured into this, the money they're going to lose, the fact that they're fighting at the White House, the shit that Dana White has said about how amazing this card is, the hype that was built around it, suffocated it to the point where our expectations were way too high. The expectations were far beyond what we got. But again, as the card sits, as is, it is stacked. Why don't we take a look at it together? Okay? This is it here. So as you can see, I wish I could zoom in a little more. Maybe I can. Oh, I can't! That's just fucking great. That's okay. You can see it. So the main event of the evening is Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje. Alex Pereira versus Cyril Gane. Or sorry, I should say Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje for the UFC Lightweight Championship to unify the interim. Then we have Alex Pereira versus Cyril Gane for the interim title, which tells us that Tom Aspinall still claims the heavyweight championship. Featured event is Sean O'Malley versus Eamon Zahabi. Great fight. Mauricio Ruffy versus Michael Chandler. Chandler's getting the fucking Dana White treatment once again, but that's okay. Ruffy's going to smoke his ass. And then we got Bo Nickal versus Kyle Dawkins. What? And then we got Diego Lopez versus Steve Garcia. Huh? Diego Lopez, another man getting the Dana White treatment. A little interesting. But you know what I'm most interested in? Not most, but what I am interested in is... Whoops, I should keep that open. Is my initial picks. Okay? My initial picks for the White House card. Now, let's take a look at the screen together. Back in, I don't know, February... January, late January at some point, before we even knew anything about the White House card, before we knew that it was only going to be 6 fights, or possibly 7, before we knew any talks of who could possibly be on it, whatever, we all assumed it was going to be like any regular old card. So this is what I created. I said we're going to open the night. Let me zoom in here. I said we should open the night with Talbot versus Wellmaker, okay? 2 up-and-coming prospects, boom, get those out of the way. Tiba Gauthier versus Gregory Rodriguez, okay? 2 fucking heavy hitters. Another up-and-coming prospect, boom. Great fight, a great second fight of the night. Brady versus Buckley. Come to find out that these 2 are actually fighting. They're headlining their own card. That was before I even knew that, but fuck it. I thought they would have been great on this card, okay? And then we would have Gable Steveson versus Derek Lewis, 2 Americans. Donald Trump loves Derek Lewis, so put him on there. You know, we're going to let Gable debut into the UFC. Why not do it against Derek Lewis, okay? Covington versus Nickal. We know they have beef. Look at this. Look at this. I said Zahabi versus Sandhagen. Oh, how wonderful. Then I said Gary Morales, Chandler Salkild. Okay, so I still had Chandler on there. Ruffy, Pimblett. I said the winner of the BMF versus Saint-Denis. I thought maybe Harrison would come back to fight Nunes. I did say Gaethje Topuria, and we thought Jon Jones was going to be on that card. Okay, and of course he would have to fight Alex. And then I had McGregor versus whoever for, kind of had this weird thought in my head that maybe they'd come up with a White House belt for McGregor if they were to put him on it. Okay, so that was my initial predictions, okay? And everybody shit on me. But then we came to realize that it was actually only going to be 6 fights. So then I said, okay, let's still have Derek Lewis and Gable Steveson, but they can open the night, all right? And then we'll have Covington versus Nickal. Great. And then I still said Chandler. Let's put Chandler on the card, but let's put him against Salkild. All right? Because Salkild is on a dominant streak, up-and-comer. He's ranked underneath Chandler. This would have gave Salkild a chance to get ranked. Okay? American versus Australian. And then again, I had O'Malley, but I put Sandhagen on the card because, this is the matchup that would technically make more sense. O'Malley versus Sandhagen. Okay? Then I thought maybe Harrison would be ready. I said Gaethje versus Topuria as the co-main, and then I said Jones versus Pereira. Now, I specified, and I said, if Jon Jones is not going to be on the card, it should be Cyril Gane, and that should be the co-main. Okay? And turns out that is the case. Okay? So when you compare my card that I predicted to the actual card, hang on here. Okay? I said Ilia Topuria and Justin Gaethje would headline. And I said Alex Pereira and Cyril Gane will co-main if it is Cyril Gane. Okay? I did have Sean O'Malley and Eamon Zahabi on my original cards. I didn't have them against each other, but I had them on the cards. I had Mauricio Ruffy and Michael Chandler on my original cards. I didn't have them fighting each other, but I did have them on there. I had Bo Nickal on my original cards. Had him against Colby Covington, which would have been the better matchup. Okay, so the only people that I missed were Kyle Dawkins, Diego Lopez, and Steve Garcia. So for all you motherfuckers out there who were shitting on me for making these shitty predictions, look what I did. I was 3 names off. I was 3 fucking names off from what actually was on the card. Okay? So screw you. All you people shit-talking me. I was literally 3 names off. How could I have ever known any of this? How could I have known any of this? I was 3 names off, motherfuckers. God damn. All right, but there's all this fucking drama and macaroni going on with this White House card, okay? Because initially... the Friday or Thursday, whenever the weigh-ins were, before UFC 326, Dana White came out and said, I'm going to announce the White House card, and it's going to be this Saturday. Okay? And during the weigh-ins... Wow! Joe Rogan, shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. Okay? Let's actually watch this together here. Gosh, Joe Rogan's got a loud mouth on him, doesn't he? Okay, so Thursday night, I believe this was, or Friday, whenever. Or I guess it would have been Friday, during Slap Fight. Dana was hanging out with his girlfriend, Nina Drama, and he had this to say.
I'm hungover. I went out with Kid Rock last night. Bad idea. We drank a lot of whiskey. Big, fat-headed Dana White emoji. Fuck you! What dumb shit do you have for me this evening? I'm too hungover to do one name of this thing nonstop, and one of the fights literally about the White House fight. So we've been working on this thing nonstop, and one of the fights literally just fell out when I walked in here. I think Hunter killed himself. I don't know.
Okay, so he says one of the fights literally dropped out as I walked in here. During the weigh-ins, everyone was speculating that this was the moment that Hunter Campbell discovered it. So let's watch.
Heavyweight division, Luke Fernandez versus Rodolfo Bellato.
Okay. So that's Hunter Campbell. That's Sean Shelby, Mick Maynard. I don't know who's who. I can't remember.
Official weight 205.
Okay, so that looks like someone who just got some horrendous news. Imagine being a matchmaker for this and you spend all these months, weeks, trying to make this card. And then that's how you get the news, and that's when you get the news, literally the day before it's being announced. That's unbelievable. All right? Now, everyone was speculating, could it possibly have been Islam versus Ilia Topuria? It couldn't be. There's no way, right? Okay? And Dana himself even claims it was not true.
Reporting out of Spain today saying that it was going to be Ilia Topuria and Islam Makhachev, and that fight fell apart on Friday. Well, Justin Gaethje also said he was told Thursday he wasn't on the card, and then on Friday he was.
That is true.
So what happened with Islam, I guess? Because you know how fans are, a lot of them.
That's not true, I said.
Sure. So
it was never Islam versus
Ilia
Topuria, yeah.
So anyone who thinks Islam ducked this fight or anything like that, it's all incorrect.
Don't worry about what fights are being made. We announced which ones are made and which ones will be happening. I told you there were some weird circumstances. The reason that fight fell out, and it wasn't up on stage with Mick, Hunter, and Sean. It was that power slap that the fight fell apart that night. And then all the boys went back to the office and literally were there till 9 in the morning. And that's how Gaethje ended up on the card.
When can we expect to see Islam Makhachev back?
And Topuria wasn't originally supposed to be on the card either. Okay. So he got the call too.
Gotcha. When?
I don't believe a word out of that bald motherfucker's mouth. I'm sorry, I don't. Okay? He doesn't know how to tell the truth. And he doesn't want to. He doesn't need to. Okay? And I don't know how to feel about it, because what if even if it was Ilia and Islam, how can we prove it? Well, Ilia Topuria's, I was going to say something and I can't remember. Ilia Topuria's manager was on a podcast and he said that he hates Mexicans. I'm sorry, he didn't say that. What he said was, he confirms that the UFC originally told Ilia he was not going to fight on the White House card. Later, they asked him last week about fighting Islam or Justin Gaethje. They chose Islam, but negotiations never started for whatever reason. Dana said Islam has a hand injury, so that was probably the reason. And only on Friday night did the fight between Ilia and Justin come together. I'm an American boy, ba-rum-bum-bum-bum. And then Ilia and Islam were beefing on Twitter. Ilia says, once again, someone else who will pay for Islam's escape. Both of their manager is is a bitch and also ugly as hell. Islam responds, your fat ass manager don't have to ask for billions to fight me. We'll do it for free. And then they're going back and forth. Ilia then says, once again, Islam comes up with an excuse. This time it's an injury. I always knew I would be part of the White House event, even when the UFC told me at one point that they wouldn't count on me for the event. I knew it was part of the negotiation. When they finally told me I would be on the White House card, they mentioned Islam, and I didn't hesitate for a second to accept the fight. Even though the fight hadn't been officially confirmed yet, the White House card was going to be announced the next day. And when I woke, I found out that Islam had gotten injured. And then Justin Gaethje appeared. Once again, someone else who will pay for Islam's escape. Both of their manager is a bitch and also ugly as hell. Justin, see you at the White House. I'm not someone who humiliates people. It will be quick. When you wake up, everything will be over. Another Conor McGregor quote. This guy just wants to be Conor McGregor so badly. Okay? Now I want to talk about Jon Jones. Because we all think Jon Jones should have been on this card. We all think it should have been Ilia versus Topuria. Okay? And yes, of course it should have been. It should have been Islam versus Topuria. It should have been Islam versus Topuria. But if Islam genuinely has a broken hand, then we can't do it. Okay? Now, I know we shouldn't be doing things like this because Justin Gaethje has the interim title, so the interim title holder should unify the belt against the actual belt holder, okay? We've been down this road with Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall, with Tom Aspinall having to defend the interim title, and that was a bunch of horse shit, and we don't have to go down that road again. But these are exceptional circumstances, okay? Justin Gaethje can afford to wait because we have the White House card, okay? We have the White House card. It's a huge, significant, once-in-a-lifetime moment that will never, ever, ever happen again. So, Justin, just sit on the side for now. We are going to have Islam versus Ilia Topuria. The fight that we've all wanted for a very fucking long time. A fight that should have happened last year, but never did because there was both guys changing weight classes and all the other shit that went on. But that's fine. Who cares? Okay? We don't actually know if it was supposed to be Ilia versus Islam, but if it was, that fucking sucks that we don't get that right now. Now when it comes to Jon Jones, okay? Of course, the horse. we should have had Jon Jones on here, okay? Now, Jon Jones has come out and said himself that he went to the UFC and he negotiated, and he originally came to them with the $30 million, as which he was offered to fight Tom Aspinall. The UFC said no, and he then reported that he went down to the $15 million because of the fact that Conor Benn was given $15 million to sign to Zuffa Boxing. Okay? Which is still far beyond any UFC fighter gets to begin with, let alone some co-main Apex boxing match on the 4th fucking event that they've ever had with Zuffa Boxing. Okay? So Jon Jones went down to that $15 million. They still didn't want to do it, so they lowballed him even more, and he didn't take the offer. He didn't want to do that offer because he wasn't getting what he thought he deserved. Now, I will say this. If anybody deserves any sort of large pay within the UFC space, it most definitely is Jon Jones. Of course it's Jon Jones. He's the guy. He's at the top of the pecking order for the current UFC. Out of everyone on the current roster of the UFC, he's at the top. Okay? Conor's not there right now. Sure, he's back in the testing pool, but he hasn't been fighting. He hasn't fought since like when? I don't even remember the last time he's fought. It's been years. It's been like 5 years, okay? So if anyone deserves good pay, it's Jon Jones. And because of this Conor Benn situation, people are opening their eyes to this. They're like, okay, Dana, if you're willing to pay Conor Benn $15 million fucking dollars for one fight, not even a UFC fight, a boxing fight in an organization that's only 4 events in, at the Apex, for a co-main event, for some title that isn't even established yet. Now, yes, I understand that they're trying to build this into an empire, and the way to do that is to take guys, the best guys in the world, and bring them into your organization. And the only way to do that is to pay them the money and build the brand and build recognition. Of course you're going to do that. But if you're going to do that for those guys, you have to pay the UFC fighters at least the same or above. Jon Jones is way more significant, famous, credible, experienced, skilled than Conor Benn ever is. Nobody knows Conor Benn. Unless you're a hardcore boxing fan, nobody gives a fuck about Conor Benn. Okay? So that's eye-opening to everybody, especially Jon Jones. So when Jon Jones comes to the UFC to make his offer, and they decline, and then he lowballs himself to at least get to the same level as Conor Benn, they still decline him the offer. Of course Jon Jones is going to feel shitty about it. Okay? And then Dana White gets on the mic and says, never ever, absolutely not, Jon Jones was never ever a part, which I have the video here. And we need to elaborate on this more, but let's just watch this first.
What fight fell out, which is fair enough, but there is obviously...
Well, there's weird circumstances around it that we probably shouldn't talk about.
Okay. There is speculation, of course, that it's Jon Jones.
No, it's not. Ever, which I told you guys 100,000 times, was Jon Jones even remotely in my mind to fight at the White House. I wouldn't. First of all, I've told you why I wouldn't do it. And number two, some guy with meta glasses on filmed him talking about his hips, that his hips are so bad. And I don't know if you guys saw that flag football game where he can barely run. Jon Jones he retired because of his hips. He's got arthritis in his hips. Apparently he's been, doctors say he should have hip replacement.
So never, ever, ever was Jon Jones in talks, apparently, according to that Dana White statement, but that's not true. Okay, they were negotiating, and they couldn't come to an agreement because they didn't want to pay him the money. All right? Now, okay, everybody on the internet, a lot of people have forgotten. A lot of people have forgotten who Jon Jones is and what Jon Jones specifically did. I feel like everybody has forgotten about it. Even Tom Aspinall has forgotten about it. Okay? We all know that when Tom Aspinall got the interim title, Jon Jones continued to duck and duck and duck Tom Aspinall. He even went off to fight Stipe while Tom Aspinall had the interim title. And Tom had to go and defend that title, and he made him wait and wait a year and a half, only to say that he retired. But that's not the point I'm trying to get at here. Jon Jones, before that moment of him retiring, he said that he is going to accept the deal. He is going to accept the $30 million deal, the $30 million offer to fight Tom Aspinall. He said he's going to accept it. Dana White came on the mic and he said this fight is 100% happening. It was a done deal. It was ready to go. And then Jon Jones backed out the last minute. He backed out. He backed out of what was going to be one of the biggest and most anticipated fights of the year, if not in a long time. We were all waiting for that. It was Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. It was Ilia and Topuria. And what was another one? I guess Khamzat and Dricus was something we were looking forward to, but we didn't know it was going to go that way. There might have been one other one, but I can't remember. But regardless, the Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall fight was the fight. That was the one. And Jon Jones fucked it up. And that's not the first time that he's done that. Okay? He isn't reliable. I feel like everybody's forgetting, as good as Jon Jones is, and as much as we needed him on this card, he is not reliable. So, of course, when he comes back to them after he fucked them over to ask for that $30 million, of course, they're not going to give it to him. Why would they? If you were in Dana White's position, you wouldn't either. You just wouldn't. After what he did, you got to look at it that way. Everyone has forgotten about the fact that he did this. Okay? They're not going to give it to him. And you might be saying, oh, we need to just forget about all that. This is the White House card. Just get him on the card. Who cares? Forget the past. Yada, yada. Okay, whatever. But still, let's say he signs the deal, or at least accepts it, and then upon signing it, he backs out again. He pulls some shit like he did with Tom Aspinall. Now, there'd be a less chance of that happening because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but you can't take that risk with Jon Jones. You have to make the card that you know is going to at least happen, okay? Because imagine if they signed Jon Jones to this White House card and he pulled some stupid shit that he always does and backs out after they already announced it, or hurts himself, or says he's injured, or whatever. That's going to look even worse than if they just didn't sign him to begin with. Because everybody that they have signed on right now, you bet your ass they're going to make sure that they can make it to that card. 100%. They're going to make sure that they get on that card. All right? And then, for those saying that Cyril Gane is getting rewarded for poking Tom Aspinall in the eyes, listen, I understand, okay? And I felt that way to begin with. But I even said it's probably... I had assumed that they were going to strip Tom Aspinall. Simply strip him and just straight up make Cyril fight Alex for the vacant title. That would have been some big baloney. But they didn't. They're doing the interim, which means Tom Aspinall is still the champ. Okay? Now, you might be saying, okay, well, if it's not Jon Jones, who else is it going to be? Who else is it going to be? They have no choice. It has to be Cyril Gane. He's not getting rewarded for poking Tom Aspinall. There's no other option. There's no other option in the heavyweight division. So you put Alex Pereira versus Cyril Gane. Now you might be saying, that's whatever. Okay? At the surface level, that might not be that exciting. But just think about it for a second. Think about this. With that fight specifically, either outcome is fucking fantastic. Just hear me out for a second. I love Alex Pereira, as does everybody. I don't know if there's anybody who doesn't. Actually, I know somebody who doesn't. If Alex Pereira wins, that means we get Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira for the heavyweight title, and Alex Pereira could potentially be the undisputed heavyweight champion, meaning he will be officially a 3-time belt holder, 3-time champ, someone who has never done that. Now, he will do that with the interim championship if he wins against Cyril, but it will solidify it if he beats Tom Aspinall. But what if he doesn't beat Tom Aspinall? What if Tom Aspinall beats Alex Pereira? Holy shit! Tom Aspinall defeats the man that everyone fears, like one of the greatest fighters to ever be within the modern UFC era. Like, holy shit. Okay, either way, whether Alex wins, whether Tom wins, that's a fucking fantastic fight. But we get that. Now, if Cyril Gane happens to win against Alex Pereira, guess what? We now get Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane 2, the revenge match. Because you know Tom Aspinall is pissed. He said it. He wants to absolutely destroy Cyril Gane. Okay? Now imagine how hyped that fight will be. It's fucking incredible. Fantastic. Superior. Bada boom, bada boppy. Okay? Now the other factor you got to consider when it comes to these White House events, this White House event, is the fact that it's already selling itself. It has already sold itself. The fact that it's at the White House means that without even knowing who's on the card, the whole world, or at least all of America, is going to tune in regardless. They're just going to be curious. What the fuck is going on? UFC at the White House? What? And I talk to people nowadays who are not involved in that. I tell them about it, and they're like, what? Well, I gotta watch that. You know, because it's a spectacle. And they don't know anybody. Okay, so they're already going to have eyes on the situation. Which is why they didn't put Conor McGregor on there. And Conor McGregor said that himself. Conor McGregor doesn't headline UFC 200 or 300. It's 201. It's 301. It's International Fight Week. It's the card immediately after these big events. And why? Like I said, the White House card sells itself. Okay? So while the White House card is playing out, guess what they do? They're like, hey, are you guys enjoying this? All you new viewers? Well, guess what? Next month, for International Fight Week in July, Conor McGregor's coming back. Ooh, now you're hooked. Now you're like, you think this card's good? Well, guess what? We got Conor McGregor coming back next month. So you better fucking tune in for that shit. It's brilliant. It actually makes sense. Okay? They're not just putting people on these cards that they don't care about. There's actually some thought and effort going into it. And I actually don't mind that. I don't mind that. Because again, at the surface level, if you look at this White House card, absolute banger. Like if that was the main card for, I don't know, UFC 327 or 28 or whatever, you'd look at this and go, holy shit. That's fucking unbelievable. All right, now, Bo Nickal versus Kyle Dawkins, it's like, okay, Bo's always getting the fucking... Bo, Diego Lopez, and Michael Chandler are always getting the fucking Dana White treatment. Okay? Because, like, why? Okay, I get why Michael Chandler is on the card because, you know, he's American. He's been wanting Conor McGregor forever. They can't give him Conor McGregor for some reason. He just can't get it. So they're like, okay, you know what? We'll give you the White House card, okay? He's very entertaining to watch. But look who he's fighting. He's fighting Mauricio Ruffy, who's ranked number 9, and he's ranked number 13. And Mauricio's killing it right now. I imagine that fight is going to end in Michael Chandler getting knocked the fuck out. But could you imagine if Michael Chandler knocks out Mauricio Ruffy though? Whew, that's gonna sting. That would sting Ruffy. Okay, it makes sense that Bo Nickal's on there. You know, not only because of the Dana White treatment, but because, you know, he's one of Trump's really good buddies. But you know what they should have done? Like, since they're putting Diego Lopez on, they should have given Diego Lopez Yair Rodriguez. Fuck, that would have been good. God damn it, dude. And then Bo Nickal, if it was Diego Lopez and Yair Rodriguez, Bo Nickal, and what the fuck's his name? Colby Covington. Ooh, because we know the history between Covington and Bo Nickal. They had that beef at the RAF event. Okay, and they just have beef in general, and they both have ins with Donald Trump. They could have fought each other. That would have been sick as fuck. Okay? But Bo actually came out on the Ariel Helwani show. I think it was this week. And yeah, it was this week. And he said that Covington was offered the fight, but he declined. He declined the offer. Let's take a listen.
I also saw you say you asked for Colby. What happened when you asked for him?
I think that Colby was, again, a guy that wasn't really on my radar until the Real American Freestyle event in January. And, you know, he kind of spouted off about me quite a bit. And I was like, okay, well, we can fight. And then post-match for him, he said that he wanted to move up to middleweight and fight at 185. So I was like, wow, well, this is perfect. Everything's lining up, and let's do it. And so obviously asked for him, and the UFC tried to make the fight. I know they talked to him extensively, and, you know, long story short, he just wouldn't do it. You know, I think, you know, even told him, like, hey, if you want to be on this card, you have to fight Bo. And he said no. So he would rather, you know, be a coward and not fight me than be on the White House card, which is a once in a lifetime, well, once ever opportunity. So, I mean, I think that says pretty much everything about the guy, that he's willing to talk like that and make those statements and tell me I'm easy work. And then he, given this huge opportunity to compete against me, still, you know, wouldn't do it. Everyone knows it would be basically just like leading a lamb to slaughter, which, you know, it is what it is, but I think the people want to see it, and it would have been an exciting fight. But
yeah, okay. So, and then I saw a video today of Colby Covington. He was on a podcast, and according to him, he said that he was bummed about not being on the card because according to him, he wasn't even offered. The MMA junkie with Mike Bond. Whoops.
This card.
I mean, definitely. I wouldn't say bothered, but I would just say, you know, more like bummed. You know, just a little bummed. You know, just thought that, you know, I was a shoo-in for that spot. You know, like I'm the one that brought Trump into UFC back in 2018. You know, when no one was supporting him, there wasn't an athlete alive that was walking around Times Square supporting him like I was, wearing a MAGA hat through Times Square with my belt and, you know, going to media tours, you know, at Sports Illustrated, ESPN, and everybody calling me the white elephant in the room for supporting Trump and wearing a MAGA hat. So, you know, I thought that, you know, I was going to be able to get that call to represent the U.S. and be on the White House card, but unfortunately it wasn't in their cards. You know, Hunter didn't give me the opportunity. The UFC didn't give me the opportunity. I wasn't going to go to Trump. Everybody's like, oh, you should have went to Trump and you should have just asked him for a favor. Man, he's got way more important things to work.
Yeah. Okay. So according to Colby, he wasn't even offered the fight, but according to Bo Nickal, he ducked him. According to Bo Nickal, he was offered the fight, and he said no, which I could absolutely see. Because Colby Covington, Colby Covington. He's not on a good run lately, and he's still ranked in the welterweight division, and he hasn't fought since, when was it? Like the end of 2024? He had a loss to Joaquin Buckley in December, and he hasn't been back since. All right? But what he is doing is he's having another RAF match against none other than Dylan Dennis. What the heck? Dylan Dennis versus Colby Covington. I gotta say, RAF is killing it, dude. They're killing it with these matchups. Like, it's just crazy. Like, the guys you're seeing match up in wrestling is... it's just wackadoo. It's free shavakadoo. It's like, if you saw these matchups in the UFC, you'd be like, holy fuck. But because it's on RAF, it's not nearly as exciting. It just isn't. All right? They're killing it in the sense that they're making these matchups with these crazy guys. But it's only limited to Fox, which means I can't even watch it because I live in Canada. The Fox Nation shit is only available in the United States. Same as the Paramount shit. So I would tune in for this, but even if I do, it's just not that entertaining. It really isn't. But I will say, they're really bringing a light to the wrestling world. But as it sits for the White House card, there's not a whole lot more I gotta say other than this. Okay? We're just gonna end on Jon Jones here. So, Jon Jones has requested to be released from the UFC. You know, Dana White continues to say he doesn't want anything to do with Jon Jones. He doesn't want to put him on the biggest card they're ever going to have, the biggest card of this year. And we know that MVP is now getting involved with MMA. Now, they're a very fresh company, but look at what the fuck that they've accomplished. Jake Paul and his partner, can't remember his name, with MVP, Most Valuable Promotions. Okay, they got Netflix. They have Netflix on their side, and they're now having their first MMA bout on Netflix. Ronda Rousey versus Gina Carano, and co-mained with Francis Ngannou versus, what the fuck's his name? Philippe Lins. Right. Okay. Francis Ngannou got released from the PFL. He's now signed with MVP. He can make buttloads of money with MVP. And he's going to. And he's doing it on Netflix. Okay? Now, if Jon Jones does get released, which who knows if that's going to happen, we don't know about these sunset clauses, and even if Jon Jones has one. But if Jon Jones does get released, there's a very real chance that we could see Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou on MVP MMA via Netflix. Now, could you imagine if that happened? All right? There's never really been a real competitor to the UFC. There never has been. Okay, we've had PFL, we've had Bellator, there's been Strikeforce, there's, you know, Ryzen, One Championship. There's all these other organizations, but they just can't bring in the eyes that the UFC can. But look at what MVP has done. They had one of the biggest, they had the biggest card ever. And it was Jake Paul and fucking Mike Tyson. Now, mind you, that was boxing. But look at who they got on already. Okay? And I know Ronda Rousey is retired. I know Gina Carano is retired. But they got them, and they're bringing attention to them. Not only to the fighters, but to the organization themselves. And they got Francis Ngannou. They have Francis Ngannou. And they can afford to pay these fighters what they deserve. So we're now seeing that the UFC, or sorry, Dana White and Zuffa Boxing is willing to pay these nobodies all this money, but they're not willing to pay these huge names in their biggest organization the money that they deserve. And why? Because there's no competition. There's no reason to. They know that the fighters that they have can't get success the way that they do on their platform. But if all these UFC fighters are now going to see that there's money opportunities at an organization like MVP, where they can be on Netflix and make millions of fucking dollars, there may be a day where fighters in the UFC start flocking over to MVP. And we might actually get the fights that we want to see in MVP on Netflix. Could you imagine that? Now, I don't see an issue with that. I don't. Because that will be the motivating factor, the driving force to make sure that the UFC pushes to actually get everything done that they possibly can to give us the fights that we want. And whether they happen on the UFC or MVP, we're going to get what we deserve. We're going to get what we want. We're going to get the fights that should happen. It's going to be like the old days. I can see that being a possibility, especially now. Like, all this stuff is just kind of accumulating at the same time. Okay? It just so happens that Jon Jones didn't get put on the White House card and had the dispute about the pay. And then we find out that Zuffa was willing to pay Conor Benn $15 million, but that's not even close to what they pay to the top fighter in the UFC. And right after that, it gets announced that Francis Ngannou leaves the PFL, joins MVP, and we know he's making millions. That's the reason why he joined MVP. Francis Ngannou even came out in support of Jon Jones. Okay, he said, you deserve that $30 million after everything you've done for the sport, and they should be rolling out the red carpet for you. Of course, whatever. Okay, he did fuck over them, but that's more of a reason for Jon Jones to go to MVP. Now, can he go to MVP? Not right now. He's still signed with the UFC, but he wants to be released. He wants to be released. Can that happen? I don't know. But we might see a future where the more the UFC fighters actually start to open their eyes to how shitty they're being paid, which they've always known, but now they know that there's an opportunity elsewhere. Okay, it's not like the PFL, it's not like Ryzen, okay, because they pay well, but they still don't pay as well, and there's not as much notoriety in those events or in those organizations. But MVP is growing fast. There is potential for this to be true competition. There is potential, okay? I wanted to talk about the BMF title, which I will. I'll talk about the BMF title quick. Because we just saw that fight for the BMF title last weekend. This past weekend. Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira 2. And you see, this is the problem with the BMF title. The name of the belt is literally Baddest Motherfucker. And originally it was supposed to be a one-off thing, a fun novelty, something special for a specific moment. But over time it got reintroduced to fill spots and help save certain cards. And to be fair, in some cases it actually worked incredibly well for what it was supposed to do. I mean, look at UFC 300. That's probably the best example of it being used perfectly. But what are we seeing now with this title? It's starting to become overutilized and watered down. Now, don't get me wrong. Both Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway are absolutely bad motherfuckers individually. They're legends on their own right. Nobody is questioning that. But the BMF title itself is supposed to represent the baddest fights you can possibly put together. And lately, that just hasn't been the case. If the fight we just saw had simply played out as a normal fight on any numbered card, or even as a regular co-main event on any numbered card, it probably would have been viewed as an incredible win for Charles. But because it's tied to the BMF title, the expectations suddenly become way higher. And honestly, that's becoming a trend with the UFC in general. Back in the day, expectations were set high, and more often than not, those expectations were met. Nowadays, expectations are set extremely high, and they almost never end up being met. Now, yes, hindsight is always 20/20, but we did know what Charles was capable of going into that fight. And we also know that if you put an elite grappler, and some people would argue the best grappler in MMA, against someone who is primarily known for their boxing, there's always a pretty high chance the fight is going to end up in the grappler's domain. Because we also had a similar feeling going into the Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira fight. And yet Ilia still surprised everybody. He's just that exceptionally good. So it's not always the case. So because there's always this constant unknown about whether or not a BMF fight is actually going to deliver a banger, maybe it's time to modify the concept a little bit to make sure it constantly gives fans what they expect. Because simply matching two high-level popular guys together isn't enough anymore. And if you're going to have a novelty belt like this, you need real stakes and a real identity behind it. The belt is already an offshoot from regular titles, so why not lean into that and make it as interesting as possible? Leave fights like Charles versus Max for the actual championship fights, or for big non-title co-main events. But if we're talking about the BMF belt, let's make it something different. We've got guys like Ariel Helwani saying maybe it should be open weight with no rounds. And when you think about it, it's like, why the hell not? Another idea would be to specifically match fighters who want to stand and strike. Keep the BMF lineage for fighters who just want to stand and bang. Look at Charles and Max, for example. Both of them were knocked out cold by the current lightweight champion, Ilia Topuria. Would that not technically make Ilia the true BMF? But here's another idea. Instead of just matching up strikers, why not go even further and create a rule set that forces it? Maybe something like the dirty boxing rules, where grappling is limited or not allowed at all, and the focus is purely on standing exchanges. Elbows, kicks, knees, all that stuff. Now, I know what some people will say. This is MMA. If you want stand-up wars, go watch kickboxing or boxing, yada, yada. I know. And that is fair. But the BMF title already exists, and at this point, it doesn't look like it's going anywhere. And if that's the case, then maybe it's time to lean into the chaos a little bit and actually turn it into something that consistently delivers the kind of fights the name promises. Because right now, the bar just hasn't really been met in the Paramount era. So maybe it's time to spice things up. I think if you're going to have this BMF title, there needs to be rules established with it. Okay? Yeah, the fights that we had leading up to this Charles and Max fight were all pretty good. They were all bangers. Okay? And we got one of the best knockouts in UFC history on UFC 300 when Max Holloway claimed that title. Okay? So that's where the expectation is for this BMF title. So there needs to be a change. There needs to be something established with the BMF title to make sure that it delivers exactly what you're expecting. Because what we saw Saturday night was not BMF worthy. If it was not for the title, it would have been great, but it was for the title. So we didn't get what the fuck we were expecting, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it goes. Because I even saw Ben Askren say, okay, what if you're allowed 3 takedowns? After that, That's it. No more. But I say just get rid of the takedowns altogether. Create a rule set for the BMF title. Either that or get rid of the fucking thing. Get rid of it. We don't need it anymore. It shouldn't have even gone on this long as it is. But if you're keeping it, change the rules. Make it live up to the name. You can't be the baddest motherfucker by doing what Charles Oliveira did. Yeah, it's a bad motherfucker move in a sense, I guess. He won the fight dominantly. But that's the UFC standard. That's the UFC standard. That's not the BMF standard. That's not what the BMF is supposed to be viewed as. Okay? And yeah, guys like Joe Rogan will make the argument, but then get rid of the fucking belt then. Get rid of the BMF title. We don't need it. If that's the kind of fights that we could potentially get in the future, then we don't need it. Because think about it. Now Charles Oliveira has that title. Whoever he fights next to defend that title, he's going to do that to them. Whoever it is, he's going to do the same thing to the next person. And he'll keep the belt again. And who knows how long that could go on for? I don't know. So I'm curious what you guys think. If the UFC is going to keep the BMF belt around, should they change the rules or the matchmaking to make it more exciting? Or should the UFC just retire the belt entirely and keep things focused on the real championships? Let me know in the comments below. Bartle B, Bungle Lee. There's not really much other news. But what I did forget to mention was this. This is the fight prediction sheet for this weekend. We've got Josh Emmett versus what the fuck is his first name? Vallejos. Emmett versus Vallejos. I can't remember Vallejos' first name. I also don't think that's how you pronounce his name. I think it's Vallejos or something. Whatever. Dude, if you want this fight prediction sheet, the link is in the description or my bio. It's a sheet you can download and print off, hand out to your friends during fight night, use it for yourself. It just allows you to make your picks throughout the night. It has all the information you need on it. You can even rate the card at the end, yada, yada, yada. You'll figure it out once you download it. It's completely free. Even if you don't care, just go take a look and see what you think. Go download it and see. And I potentially will be doing a standing solo watch party this weekend. I hopefully will. Okay, some fight. Before we end it, some fights to look out on this card here. Let's see. Anything in the early prelims? Nothing really exciting. Okay. In the prelims, we've got Chris Curtis versus Orolbai. Okay. This will deliver. Orolbai is a smashing motherfucker. He's a smashing boy, and if he wins against Chris Curtis, which I think he will, he might get a ranked fight next. I'd imagine he would, or at least he deserves it. So this should be a fucking bangarang, okay? And Chris Curtis, he's a heavy hitter too, and he trains with Sean Strickland. This might be a pretty good one, Johnson has been killing it. The only man to defeat Joshua Van. And he also defeated Lonnie Kavanaugh. Also the only man to defeat Lonnie Kavanaugh. And Lonnie went on to defeat Brandon Moreno a couple weekends ago. And now he is high up in the rankings. So this might be pretty decent too. And if we go up to the main card, ooh, look who's back. Asplund. Okay? This is Asplund's chance to get into the heavyweight rankings. But this is going to be a tough fight for Asplund. Okay? Asplund came out strong. You know how I feel about Asplund. I love him. Absolutely love Asplund. And if you don't know his story, go watch him on the Dana White Contender Series. Watch his post-fight speech. Listen to what he has to say. Just look up his name and see what kind of guy he is, okay? He used to be a really fat boy. And now he's got flabby skin, but he's making his way through the UFC. He's got some decent wins on his record. Won his Contender Series fight with a knockout. Won his debut with a knockout. But this is going to be a real test for him. And then, of course, we got Harry Hardwick back. Love Harry Hardwick. 2-time featherweight champ. Maybe even 3-time. I don't know. In Cage Warriors. And his debut into the UFC was a last-minute debut. And I'm so great. I want him and his brother, George, are both in Cage Warriors. You know, they were both champions in Cage Warriors. I want them both in. I want George to get into the UFC. He will get in soon. But Harry's debut into the UFC, he had such a rough time, dude. Round 1 leg kick, TKO. His leg got fucking destroyed. Oh my God, it was bad. So I'm voting 100% for Hardwick here. I hope he can bring it back. This one should be pretty decent. We got Jillian Robertson, who's a Canadian. Bop. So she's also the favorite. So it'd be great if she could win. Get higher up in those strawweight rankings. Closer to the title. Maybe we could have a Canadian win the title. I don't know. But anyway, that's it for this episode of the Dynamite Gizmo Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell. But more specifically, just subscribe. Okay, that's what I want most. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye!